One of the biggest debates in game over the last 20 years has been whether a game is primarily logical or primarily emotional. See, when I first got into game, there was this camp that said that you should just have a script and an answer and an algorithm for everything, and you'd plan out and tell the same stories over and over again, and that worked to a point, but it had its problems. Then later on, there was this idea that you should just be natural and go with your emotions, and if you feel the right thing, that the right techniques will naturally come out of you as if by some kind of instinct. And that has some good elements and some bad elements, but both have deep flaws. So I'm going to answer this question for you of what is the role of emotions and what is the role of logic in game. And in order to do that, what I want to do is I want to give you an example of what game would look like if you were purely logical, an example of what it would look like if you were purely emotional, and then what game looks like when it's just right. And then I'll use that and use those examples to explain the role of logic and emotions and how you can get the best out of both in your game. So let's dive right into it. First of all, let's say that you are hyper logical. All right, so you're hyper logical, you're caught up in your logical world, focused on whatever you're doing, hot girl walks by, you probably don't even look up from what you're doing, you may not notice her. If you do notice her, you're probably going to give a bunch of excuses and rationalizations for all the reasons why it's low probability that it will work, and you'll probably talk yourself out of even going and approaching. If you do go and approach her, you're probably going to have a really boring conversation where you ask a lot of get-to-know-you questions, you talk about all your accolades and basically present a resume to the girl. And if you're ever on a topic, no matter whether it's going well or not, you're going to finish the topic, be logical. You might even get into arguments with the girl. You might talk about bad topics like politics and religion that are not going to lead towards any kind of sexual advance. And you're probably not going to make it man to woman, and you're probably not going to escalate in any way. So you're going to end up friend-zoned at the very best, probably just boring the girl and having her be like, okay, well, thanks, nice to meet you, bye. That's the most likely scenario if you're hyper-logical, if you even had the motivation and desire to go over and talk to her, which in the case of most guys who are hyper-logical, they don't even do that. Now let's look at if you're extremely emotional. All right, so if you're extremely emotional, you probably see the girl and you're suddenly like, oh my God, that girl's hot, and you're motivated to go. But then in the very next moment, you're like, oh God, what if I embarrass myself? This could be wrong, and then you hesitate, and then you probably don't go. So just like the logical guy, for a completely different reason, you probably don't approach. If you do approach, you may be approached with something bold and uncalibrated or over the top that doesn't quite work. If you do get a good reaction, you are probably going to not be calibrated. You're probably going to escalate too fast or do something overly bold or something like that and uncalibrate and mess it up there. If you do happen to get something like a shit test, you might overreact, get into an argument, be combative, hold your frame too strongly. In any case, you might have more passion and more possibility of a good result, but you're very likely to blunder it. Right? You might have some sparks of good stuff in your conversation, but it's going to be very sporadic, very random. It's also going to lack direction, so you may find yourself just going in circles, and while you're having a decent interaction, it just never progresses. So that's what will happen with guys who are entirely or inherently overly emotional. The guy who's just right, how does this work? Okay, so he notices the girl, and he has two competing emotions that go through his body. On the one hand, he's motivated, inspired to go talk to the girl. On the other hand, he's a little nervous, and the social repercussions hit him. And then he takes a minute, breathes, and says, okay, logically, what should I do? I know there's something to do. What should I do? And he says, okay, well, this one's an excuse. This one's legitimate. So even though I'm nervous, I'm going to man up and do it. And he walks over, and he says the best thing he can think of. And as he goes through the interaction, he's going to notice how the girl's responding. And when she responds well, it's going to feel good. He's going to do more of the things that made her respond well. And when she responds badly, he's going to notice it, and it's going to trigger something in his mind to be like, okay, I need to make an adjustment. I need to pass that shit test. I need to change the topic. If he notices that the conversation was good and it starts getting too logical, he's like, wait, this is a bad change. This doesn't feel good to me. Okay, breathe, take a minute. What should I do? Oh, change the subject or insert a push-pull or something along those lines. And when it comes time to close, he's going to think, oh, this is going well. Maybe I should escalate. And then he's going to think, okay, breathe. What's the right way to escalate? Let's do it in stages so I don't miscalibrate. And then let's make sure that at the end I ask for an appropriate close and give myself a chance to see the girl again in the future. So that last guy is a nice combination of emotions and logic, and you really need both. And let's talk about why. First of all, why do you have emotions and what are emotions good for? Well, there is so much stimulus coming at you all the time, you cannot possibly process it. And even if you could, it would take a tremendously long time. This is why animals with smaller brains than us have emotions and have instincts, but they don't have logic. Because emotions and instincts are quick, they can take in a lot of information, and they give you a decent answer a decent amount of the time. They give you a good enough answer to keep you alive, a good enough answer to muddle through and get by. But it's not as good of an answer as logic. What's the evidence for that? Well, we as human beings are the dominant species on the planet. Why? opposable thumbs, but also logic, right? The fact that we can think, we can problem solve, we can figure things out, right? And so when we have difficult problems, do we solve them better with emotion or better with logic? Do we do better as human beings or as animals? Historically, we do a lot better as human beings, and that is what logic is good for. If you have a defined problem that you need to solve, you're almost always going to do a better job of it with logic than with emotions, and you're going to get much more consistent results with logic than with emotions. Ideally in game, here's what you should do. Your emotions are incredibly, incredibly valuable. You should trust them that there's something to be done or there's something to be paid attention to. Again, they're the alerts. So when your emotions are telling you something, take note, but then filter it through your logical, rational mind. Don't just blindly follow your emotions. Be aware of them. If you get the feeling that the girl is getting bored in the conversation, take note of that and do something about it. But don't flip out and get panicked about it. Think, breathe, what's the best thing I can do right now, and then do the best thing. So again, you use your emotions to tell you where to use your logic. And that's really what you want to be doing in game. Trust your emotions, listen to your emotions, but filter it through your logic, and the final decision needs to be your best logical, rational answer. And so what is the answer in terms of what do you need to have in game? You need to have both. You need to have both. You should be enjoying the interaction. You should be trying to be congruent in the interaction, and then whenever something is out of the ordinary, whenever something surprises you, whenever you notice something, you should take a minute, and instead of blindly reacting to it, take a minute, use your logic, react in the best possible way you know based on theory. And that's really the combination. That way you can be passionate and non-boring, but you can also be calibrated. You're really going to get the best of both worlds that way.